welcome back to the show. Today we have Bob Fitz. He's the founder and producer at SUP-X, the StartUp Expo. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Kevin, it's been a while. I think I was on the 100th episode show or
You were,
something.
and you guest hosted the 100th episode.
Yeah. Oh, I did. What are we up? What are you up to now?
240 something. I think I just posted the other day. So, yeah,
Dude, you're amazing.
it's been wild, man. So, but yeah, so maybe before we kind of get into exactly what you guys are doing at the StartUp Expo, let's
Sure.
get to know you a little bit better and start off kind of with where you grew up and a little bit of your career history.
Yeah, I was a corporate brat.
Okay.
I grew up a lot of places as my father got transferred around, primarily in the southeastern United States. But eventually, up in Detroit, Michigan, and then my family got transferred back to Atlanta, Georgia. And at that time, I was in college, and then I've lived. It was in my blood at that point. I've probably lived 5 or 6 other places since then, including Richmond, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Paris, France,
Wow.
and then 15 years in Manhattan before moving to Miami about 7 years ago. I was a structured finance guy. I worked for a Goldman Sachs subsidiary in kind of the institutional real estate management kind of their world. And then I went to work for Prudential Financial in the Newark, New Jersey, Manhattan area. I lived in Manhattan at the time and did structured finance work. And then I got out of finance. My father was a CEO and I always kind of wanted to run a business. So I got out of finance and then kind of helped start running the business rather than being on the finance side of the business, and got into M&A, started buying some companies, and then I would lead the integration. And eventually that transformed me into a COO of a couple of mid-market businesses. My foray into the startup world kind of happened semi-accidentally about 7 years ago when I moved to Florida. My brothers had always been in tech startups. And I just started going to angel events and stuff, and then got involved with a nonprofit related to entrepreneurship. And then it took on a whole other life of its own. Eventually, I created a bunch of events for that nonprofit. And one of them grew to be so large that I realized there was something here. And so I rebranded it and moved it into Convention Center. And that's now what we know as SUP-X, the Startup Expo.
Okay, interesting. I love that, right? Because I've been before, like you, well, obviously you know, but just for people listening, and I'm coming down again in July, and I'm curious to know though what exactly this year's gonna have, because I think you kind of mix it up throughout the years a little bit and make it kind of relevant to kind of what's happening in the startup space. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to, you know, do a raising money panel every single year, even though a lot of years do it. Probably the majority of years there's a panel on raising capital, but all too often they're somewhat repetitive, even though people have different guests. So we try to change the content to make it relative to what's currently going on. So, and then we also do it, based on demands that we're sensing. So we have a crypto blockchain panel this year.
Interesting.
And we're doing a cannabis panel.
Sure.
And we'll have another panel on healthcare innovation, which is huge in this
Sure.
part of the world in South Florida, but it's a big deal anywhere. We're doing one on social innovation. Most of those panels we have never done before, and we try to keep it fresh. We try to change the speakers up and not just get people from here in Florida. We get our speakers from all over the United States. I mean, for instance, you're going to be the MC, and our keynote speaker, which we haven't announced yet, is a Canadian, which we'll
Sure.
announce later. And our other keynote for the morning session is from Houston. So
Okay.
we try to keep it fresh, relevant, and kind of cutting edge to make sure that we're talking about stuff that's interesting and it's not just repetitive.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. You guys are also doing a women for women kind of a part, like, event. What exactly is that, and why is that important?
Well, I'll take a quick step back before
Sure.
going to exactly the question. I think it's important for people to understand that the real mission of SUP-X is to bring together investors, entrepreneurs, and service providers for the
Sure.
furtherance of all of them. And we do that through high quality content that's interesting to all of those people. We do it through really fun networking events. Our VIP party is a blast. As you know, I like
Sure.
parties, and
I had fun
like
last
my own
time.
party. I like my own party, and we have a good reception. And so we
Sure.
try to create good content, learning opportunities, good networking opportunities. Then we have a huge exhibit hall that's like 30,000 square feet. So
Sure.
and then it changes from year to year. Last year it was a 2-day event. This year is a 1-day event. Last year we had multiple tracks. This year I'm experimenting with doing one set of tracks, but then we're going to have some workshop stages. Just trying new models to keep it fresh and fun for people. So to your specific question, we start off SUP-X every year with some sort of diversity forum to make sure that certain communities that are under-addressed actually get addressed at our event.
Sure.
So 3 years ago, it was women in entrepreneurship. Last year, it was diversity in entrepreneurship. And this year, it's what we're calling #Women for Women.
Okay.
And we're trying to make it the largest gathering of angel groups, seed series funds, and VC funds in the U.S. in 2018 that are focused on female founders and female entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And where this grew out of was I go to tons of events, as you know, and people are always tugging me on the sleeve, female founders, female entrepreneurs saying, where else can I go? And because I sometimes feel that, I'm talking to an unreceptive audience. Sure. And they're, and some of them are more polite and some are more blunt than others and say, look, I need to be talking to people that are more like me. It'd be nice to have a woman there. And so I would invariably take out a pen or say, here's my business card, email me, and send people a list of groups that I know. And finally I said, well, this is silly. Let's just do the whole forum for the morning at SUP-X of this. So there's an awesome woman named Marcia Dawood.
Sure. I had her on the show before too.
Oh yeah.
Through you.
Yeah. Marcia's great.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Marcia has run several seed series and VC funds. And she now really runs 2 funds that are focused on female entrepreneurs. Okay. And Marcia's on the board of the Angel Capital Association, which, if people don't know, it's the largest trade association for angel groups in North America. And she's their head of their membership committee. And she also chairs their discussion group on female-focused angel groups.
Interesting. Okay.
And she's the chair of #Women for Women. And Marcia is helping me design content and recruit groups to participate in this. And we've just started recruiting groups. We probably have 7 or 8 groups already committed to participate. We'd love to get that to 2 dozen to 3 dozen. And then that forum will basically have 3 components. We'll have a keynote, some panels on the challenges of raising money as a female entrepreneur, and some suggestions on how to do it better.
Sure. And
then we're having really what I call organized networking. I want to create an environment where all the female entrepreneurs in the audience have a chance to go and actually meet and talk to these people, these female investors.
Sure.
Not in the broader, closing reception of the conference, but just them. And so we're going to kind of organize the networking. Now, we haven't figured out the exact format of that, but I suspect that it'll be organized by pre-seed, seed, and VC. And then women can gravitate to the capital sources and go and network for like 45 minutes in an organized fashion. So I always like my conference, but I'm very excited about #Women for Women.
Yeah, I think it's super important, and like it's nice to hear from people that have been there and done that, right? And it's hard to find that in certain parts of North America and probably even the world. So just having them kind of all concentrated in one space, and just, when I've been to SUP-X before, the amount of women that you had there was incredible that had done a ton of stuff. And I had, a ton of them on the show kind of at the event and after the event, right? So even from like my own personal firsthand experience, you had tons of them there, that I got lucky enough to interview, right? And I've had a couple of them on the show multiple times.
Well, we typically get north of 40% of our attendees are female, and some people hearing that statistic might say, "Oh, well, that's not very good. You're not at least half." I think for people who go to most startup technology conferences, it's a lot of times it's a dude fest. So 40% is pretty good, and we're very proud of that. And the forum will be excellent. I'm really excited about it, and I'm really grateful that Marcia and a couple other ladies are helping pull that together.
No, that's great. So I'm curious, you're also doing a competition. What exactly is the competition?
So the startup competition is not dissimilar from other startup competitions.
Okay.
It's not a massive dollar amount. We're not giving away $100,000 or $200,000. We give basically $25,000 in cash and prizes to the winner. To me, there's several components of any startup competition that should be valuable experiences for an entrepreneur. And so, one, you are competing, so it's healthy to have to, share your business plan and be evaluated. So any investor that comes to our conference has access to the GUS profiles of all the applicants.
Sure.
So they're getting, even if it's not, say, a startup that's chosen for the finals and on stage, there's a good chance that the investors that attend the event will be looking at all the GUS profiles. And there's 35 to 50 of the applicants will be accepted.
Okay.
Then they'll get a booth, and then they'll compete, and 5 finalists actually get on stage and compete in front of a panel of investors who are the judges, and the judges, basically pick who they think would be the winner. Now, one of the things that we talk to the judges about is we're not picking the best talker.
Okay.
You're really deciding based on your assessment of the deck that you've seen and their ability to answer these questions, who would you invest your money in?
Sure.
And there's no other parameters to them other than that. But we do ask that they don't overweight how awesome someone is at pitching.
Okay.
I've known plenty of startups who it appeared that they were in the business of the pitch competition business and actually not the business of their business. And it's important it's great if that presentation skills are followed by execution, but we just ask that they have a balanced view of the presentation. Now, one of the things I want to say about startup competition, I think it's helpful of all of them. I think personally that startups undervalue the exhibition opportunities that come with these. If you really think about the chances of them, or anyone, winning a startup competition, even if you have a great startup, there's lots of good startups that are typically going to get selected, which is why they were selected.
Sure.
So let's say there's 50 in a startup competition and it's, $100,000. Well, your expected monetary value is $2,000. Well, the booth is worth way more money than that to you. It presents an awesome opportunity for relationship capital. And, to meet investors is the obvious one, and that's the one that startups think about the most, is meeting investors. But I think it's incredibly important for them to think about, I'm meeting potential partners, customers, clients, employees, and the practice of, it might seem boring, but it's great practice to stand there for 4, 5, or 6 hours behind your booth and just doing that elevator pitch over and over and over. And I think what happens, at least in my experience of running these events, is the startups get more enamored with the size of the prize and meeting, and then secondary, the opportunity to meet investors. And those are incredibly important aspects of it. I would say that exhibition opportunities are incredibly important for startups as well.
Sure.
And they are for me too. I've experienced this myself.
Sure. Well, even just running around last time, I had people for the show for probably 6 or 8 months after the event that I was still recording that I met just on the exhibition floor, right? And it's interesting because I even had a few other people I work with come down and they met up with some of the people that I had on the show that I met on the exhibition floor, right? So maybe I didn't necessarily give them any money, like to your point, but they were on the show and, we've kept in touch over the years, and it's been...
And they don't know who's listening to your show. Exactly. They don't know. And so, it's anyone who's in, say, in some sort of services business and has to go to events, to network like I do. I'm sure some of your listeners, there are plenty of times where they're like, I do not want to go to that event tonight. They look for a million excuses. But all it takes is meeting the right one person. And I often, when I'm demotivated, that's what I tell myself to get myself out of my desk and into the car headed to an event. You never know who you're going to meet.
Sure. I think the other thing too is if you're sitting behind a booth with something that's interesting, people come talk to you. You don't need to be the one to initiate the conversation all the time. You still sometimes do, but if you're pitching your startup, people want to know about it, so they're asking you about it.
Yeah, the other thing is have chocolates at your booth. I'm telling you, it's the best.
Yeah, fair.
It's the best. I see people put stress relief toys and pens and Post-it notes, and I'm telling you, the smart people know that if you put out Hershey's Kisses or M&Ms right after the lunch hour, it's like leaving crumbs of bread for squirrels, my friend. It is golden. Maybe I'm feeling way too much about myself.
No, Bob, you're right. When you said that, like the peanut M&Ms, I'd be at your booth for sure eating those things.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, how many blue ballpoint pens can one person possibly need?
No, that's great. So I'm curious, though, what exactly is the cost to actually come to SUP-X, the Startup Expo? Because I think you've made it more than affordable.
So I have no interest in putting on a startup conference that charges startups $1,000 or more to attend. Sure. I am my own startup, and right. I want it to be accessible, and I try to be reasonable in how we structure the price points. So if you're a student with a valid student ID, you could come for $29 for an all-day event.
That's great.
If you're a vet, you can come for $59. A general admission ticket, if you pay full fare, is $99.
Okay.
And then a VIP pass is $299. Okay. And essentially a VIP pass gets you into the VIP party, which is for speakers, sponsors, and investors.
Sure.
And it gets you access to the guest profiles, access to the VIP lounge, and then some one-on-one meetings can be set up at their request. But even the $99 general admission ticket, if you're one of our partner organizations, like we have over 100 partners, like nonprofits, et cetera, or accelerators or co-working spaces, you can still get that ticket for like, I forget off the top of my head, you'd think I'd know since it's my event, but I think it's like 59 or 69 bucks. So I want it to be accessible. And I realize that a startup's going to have to probably take off most of the day before and that day and possibly the day after to participate if they're driving from over 100 miles.
Sure.
So there's opportunity cost. There's travel cost, and they're thinking of all that when they're budget. I don't want them to do all that and then go, oh, and it's also, I want 3 of us to go and it's $800 a piece. There's no way.
Sure.
So we try to keep it super affordable.
Sure. So I'm curious because I didn't really realize how big the startup community is in kind of South Florida or Florida in general until I kind of met you a number of years ago and actually came to SUP-X. So for people that maybe don't know, there's a ton of stuff happening in kind of the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area and kind of beyond. Do you want to maybe speak to that quick?
Yeah, I mean, it's a national conference, but it's for sure, 80+% of our attendees are Floridian. I mean, I think it's important to remember that Florida, I think, is now the 3rd most populous state. So we have a lot of big cities,
Sure.
Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, and Miami. And when I say Miami, I mean South Florida, which is really Miami to Palm Beach. And that area is 100 miles long and probably 6 million people.
Wow.
So we're a very populous state. And unlike a lot of U.S. states, others say maybe California or Texas, we have several large population centers that are spread out and have their own ecosystems. And we have several large sectors of our economy too here: aerospace, agriculture, obviously
Sure.
travel and tourism is the obvious one, and healthcare are some really large verticals here. And as a result of all those things, and for South Florida, South Florida is the gateway to Latin America, and so
Sure.
and that's a two-way passage. We have lots and lots of Central and South Americans who live here or have their business operations here. Microsoft's Latin America headquarters is here.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yep, it's in Broward. It's very close to where the conference will be. I have 500 plus employees there. So,
Wow.
and we get, the other thing is that everyone, when they think of Miami, they think it's just, kind of a portal to Latin America, but it's also another portal for Europe to get to Latin America.
Totally.
And so we have a lot of Europeans here as well. So we have a very, at least in South Florida, we have a very diverse community, and which makes for a lot of free flows of information and interesting flow of ideas. But the ecosystem has grown rapidly in the past 6 or 7 years that I've lived here, and it's cool. One point I would make to all the people in your audience, I think there's a tendency wherever you live to compare your ecosystem to Silicon Valley.
That's fair, yeah.
It's like, you probably shouldn't compare yourself to like a supermodel or something either. It's just like there's realistic. Yeah. I just don't think it's healthy for people to compare their ecosystems to Silicon Valley. And, and there are some downsides to Silicon Valley. I mean,
there's a ton. A lot of people are leaving.
There's a lot. Well, and you can't, keep an engineer or somebody for a couple months because they just get bought away from you, and people can't afford to live there, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an amazing place. My brother lives there, and I'm not denigrating it at all. But I think it's much healthier in whichever ecosystem that you are in to compare yourself to similar cities. So in Miami, I always tell people, quit comparing yourself to, Silicon Valley. Compare yourself to like Washington, D.C., sure. Atlanta, sure. Dallas. Those are similar sized cities. I mean, New York's a tough comparison because it's got some inherent advantages, but I think if people compare to like cities, they can gauge better how they're really doing.
Sure. Well,
and I think we're doing well.
No, I agree. Like there's tons of, investors and startups, and I didn't realize how big the community was until, like I mentioned, until I kind of met you, right? And there's a lot of those kind of around the country that I think don't get enough publicity.
Look, Chattanooga, Tennessee, most people haven't even heard of, but sure. It's, or maybe you have because it's an interesting sounding name, but Chattanooga, Tennessee is not a big place, and they've got a pretty cool, little ecosystem in Greenville, South Carolina, and Kansas City, and sure. There's all kinds of cool ecosystems around the country that people aren't aware of because they're aware of Silicon Alley, Silicon Valley, maybe Silicon Beach. Sure. The big names get a lot of attention, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the startup community all over the world. And I was at a 500 startups event last night. And they have a fund, I think it's called Rise for the Rest or something like that. And okay. the whole premise of the fund is, everybody with a brain doesn't work in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a lot of really bright startups in Omaha or some of these other cities that we've been talking about. And so I think they believe that they needed a vehicle to try to find those.
Sure. But Bob, we're coming to the end of the show. So maybe let's close with maybe a quick overview of what exactly SUP-X, the StartUp Expo, is, and then where people can get more information and tickets online.
We're the largest early stage conference in the state of Florida. Our mission is to connect investors, entrepreneurs, and service providers. It's an all-day event with cutting-edge content with a series of panels, speeches, etc. We have an opening #Women for Women forum, and if anybody wants to learn more, they can go to SUP-X.org, SUP-X.org. Or they could even email me. I'm Bob at SUP-X.org, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after they've looked at the website.
Sure, and it's July 26th.
July 26th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
All right, and we'll both be there.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you back. You're great and a good friend, and we're delighted to have you. So
yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it. So well, thanks again for doing this, Bob, and have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Always a pleasure, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.